All right, so up to now we have been doing some of the development steps. The first thing we did was analyzed our problem, and then we designed our problem either with a pseudocode or with flowchart. And now we're going to do the code. So we're going to use Python to do that. And there's, if you recall, we did this before, but we'll try to do a refresher here. If you want to do a search and do idle, you can see that idle Python 3 point something is coming up. Don't really care about the point something at this point. We're just going to be using Python version 3, so the 3 is in the front of the decimal. If that's not coming up for you, you can click on your Windows icon, I guess it is, and scroll down to Python, and here you can see I have 2 versions installed. Python 2 is an older version, and the current version is Python 3, so that's the one we're going to be using in this class. And I'm going to click on this idle. Idle is a Python interpreter, and if you remember, the interpreter reads code line by line, interprets it, and renders it. And so, for example, this is what's called our interactive shell. And our interactive shell, you can see that there are these 3 chevrons, and all we can do in our interactive shell is just one line of code. So I might put print hello just to see if it works, and it prints it out right away. It just reads one line at a time and then interprets it and renders it. So I can't write a whole code program here, but I can certainly do a line by line. If you're also interested, this is a place where you can type in the word help, parentheses, and then put in something that you might want help with. For example, I don't really understand the print. What do I need to do to make that syntax work? And this gives us some information on things that I can do with it and how I can use it. And this might be a little bit out of our reach at this point in time, but at least know that help is available. Sorry. All right, so now that we're in our interactive shell, but we really want to write some code, I'm going to choose File and New File. And now I'm in an editor, and an editor is a place where, it's just like Notepad, it's just a place where I can write files, write code. And the nice thing about this particular editor is it tries to highlight things and tries to give me some kind of clue as to whether or not I'm doing it right or not. And we'll see more of that as we go along. So I'd save right away. I'm going to save this file on my desktop, and I'll just call this something simple like a sample or start. I mean, I'll just do sample. I just spell it right. Make sure you put the .py at the end to indicate that this is a Python file. And then I'm going to choose save. So nothing pretty has happened here yet because I haven't typed in any code, but now I have this sample.py file started in my desktop, and I don't know if you saw it come up, but there it is. It popped back off the screen, but it is there. All right, so let's get writing some Python code. And the first thing I'm going to do, and this is all Python now, remember we have to translate what we did in pseudocode into Python code. And the first thing I'm going to do is put 3 apostrophes. So it's not a quote plus an apostrophe, it's 3 apostrophes. And this gives us the ability to what we call comment code. So I have to put an opening and a closing one. And in the very beginning of our file, we want to put some kind of indication, just a little header information to whoever might be reading our code later on, whether it be our teacher or a co-worker or somebody who inherits our code after we're done with it. Something good to put in here would be like the author, that would be me. And then the purpose of the code is always a good idea. This is our first dive into Python code. I will demonstrate some examples, okay? And then ES. And then a date is always a good thing. A date today is September 19th. Okay. So it's always a good idea to start your what we call this header information, to start your program, your code, with some information about what the program's going to do and a little bit about the author and that kind of thing. Notice that I've started this with, as I said, 3 apostrophes. So 3 apostrophes indicate that there's going to be comments that follow, and here's the ending of those comments. And comments are code that is written in for the programmers to read. The computer, the little Python interpreter, will completely ignore it. So this is for the human eyes only, and the compiler or the interpreter will completely ignore it. And comments are very good for just that, for maintaining it in the future. All right, so let's start with something simple and we'll build on it in later videos. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some variables. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a program that, let's see, I'm going to write some more code and so I can show the difference here. I think what I'm going to do off the top is I'm going to, we're going to ask the user for their name and we're going to guess the user's age. So those are the two things that we're going to do. Notice that this time I used this hashtag instead of the quotes. Well, 3 quotes or 3 apostrophes indicate that there's multi lines of code to follow that are comments. The hashtag is just 1 line of code is about to follow, and just that 1 line of code is the comment. Any code after that, so if I wrote a print statement here, for example, this is no longer included in the comment. And you can see the pretty colors to try and indicate a little bit of what those differences are. So this is just for demonstration. Okay, so that was the goal. We're going to ask the user for their name, and then we'll ask them we'll figure out what their age is. So I'm going to start off by declaring some variables, and we've learned that when you declare a variable, you also want to decide ahead of time what data type that variable is going to be. So I'm going to create a variable named name, which is what I will put in the user's name that they enter. And actually, in this case, I think I'm going to do what's called hard coding it. So at the initial time that I create this variable, I'm going to give it a value, assign it a value of a string. So this is a literal string. This should be some review from the chapters. So this is a literal string. This is literally what value I want put inside name. I don't need to evaluate it anywhere else. Let's actually put this string into that variable. So after this line is run, the variable name has Kirsten in it. All right, so next, if you hear pounding in the background, my dog has a serious itch on his leg, or he's playing the drums. I'm not sure which, so I don't know if that's coming over, but thought you should know what it is. All right, so I think, just on a side note, I think I'm going to get their favorite animal from the user, and this is going to be a string. Well, I don't know what is currently in what they're going to put in. I'm going to leave that available, but by putting this what we call an empty string, so I have just 2 double quotes side by side, which means I'm putting a empty string, or this is my way of telling the interpreter this is going to be a string as opposed to an integer or as a float. So by giving it this double quote, it's saying this is going to be a string, but there's currently nothing in the string. We're going to be getting an age. So age is probably going to be an int. So I will make that int equal, or that age equal to 0, because 0 is an integer. And so that will tell age what type of data type it is. So now age will look at this 0 and say, oh, I'm an integer. And year of birth, because I'm going to do the calculation. I'm also going to make that an integer, because a year of birth is like, what year is it, is going to be an integer. It's not a float. All right, so I've got my variables declared, and obviously ahead of time you'd be creating pseudocode, and we're going to be doing that next. We'll be creating code from pseudocode, but I just want to get you thrown in and get you comfortable with some of the syntax of Python that we're using in this chapter. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is print. Let me just type it out, and then we'll talk about it. Print parenthesis, and then there's this little drop-down box that's trying to give me some kind of indication of what I should be putting in here. Notice the parentheses, so that tells me I need to make sure I have parentheses around it. And then it says value, and we'll learn about these things as we go along. But right now, I'm going to print. Let me just type some stuff in, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing. Okay. First of all, notice that gray box. That gray box says you've completed this as syntactically correct, meaning that the interpreter is trying to read it ahead of time and it's saying, yeah, this is one whole complete thought, so to speak, and it highlights it in the gray to let you know as best as it can that it thinks you've done it right. And what we're talking about here is we're going to print a string, so literally print the word hello. We're going to separate that with a comma, and we'll look at this more in a little bit, but right now we're just sort of getting thrown in and getting wet, so to speak. And then print whatever is in this variable. Well, what's in this variable? Kirsten, right? Because that's what we said at the very beginning. So we're just going to print the word hello. The comma kind of means a space, and print the next thing after the comma, print it right after those strings. So whatever is separated by commas will show up on the same line. Let's just look at it and see what happens. Let's see if it works. So run module, or F5, and you can see that it printed hello, space, and Kirsten. So it took the literal hello, and then the comma said make a space, and then print the next thing on the same line. So what was in name was Kirsten. So we've got this output, hello, hello Kirsten. So that seems to have worked well. And what I suggest when you build code is you do exactly this. It can get overwhelming if you try to code the whole thing at once. Just build pieces, one bit at a time, and get that to work. Once it works, then add on to it. All right, so we've got a string variable that we've put into, or that we've assigned to Kirsten. Now, you said you're going to get the favorite animal from the user. Okay, well, let's see how we can do that. Let's see. I'm going to put print, parenthesis, quote, what is your favorite animal? Question mark, and my quotes, and oh, there's the gray bar. That means I've done it correctly. Here's my point there. What if I didn't put the closing quotes on there? So I need to have the opening, I have an opening quote. I need to make sure I close that quote. Let's say I forgot. Let's say I put a closing parenthesis. Notice that I didn't get that pretty gray bar. Well, it's not pretty, but at least it's trying to show me that it understood. So I'm going to put, oh, I forgot the quotes. Okay, so I put the quotes and I haven't put the closing parentheses yet. Oh, right. Okay, so I got to put the closing parentheses. Now I get that nice gray bar that comes up, and that indicates that this is complete. Syntactically, Python is happy with me. Oh, we want Python to be happy with us syntactically. All right, so now we've prompted the user. Let's see if anything cool is happening yet. So it printed hello Kirsten. Let's see if we can put these side by side so we can see them both at the same time. That would be fabulous, wouldn't it though? Okay, so we can see it printed out hello and my name, and then the next line it came across, it said print what is your favorite animal, and it was a string. It's literally a string, and that is what got displayed to the screen. Oh, this is fun, but that didn't get anything from the user. You can see that my program ended because of these chevrons. So how do we get information from the user? Well, that's what we're going to do next. So we use this function called input. So I need this function called input. That's weird. Okay. Well, first of all, I put the word input and I put parentheses and I got that gray bar. So something is going right here so far. All right. So what happens when we use this input? This is also called a function, and we're going to learn more about functions as we go along. But anytime you see a word and then some parentheses, what's happening is I'm not actually making this print out. What's happening is I'm sending this information to something else that somebody else wrote that tells Python how to print it to your screen or how to get input from your user. So we'll learn more about that as we go along, but I know the book talks a lot about functions and arguments and parameters, and what I just want you to get out of that for now is that I'm using this word print and I'm using this word input, and they're in parentheses, and by putting things inside these parentheses as I'm told is the proper way to do it, if I follow the rules, I get results, and I don't really care how I got to the results. I don't really care how they figured out to put this string onto my keyboard, or my console here. I don't really know how this is getting information from my user, but I know it works if I do it the way that they describe. So this idea with input is that when I run input, instead of getting these chevrons returned, I'm simply going to get a flashing cursor, similar to what's happening here, waiting for me to put in the response or whatever it is I've asked them to do in response to the input. In this case, I'm waiting for a response for them to type in what their favorite animal is. So if I run this, we'll see this work. So I run it. What is your favorite animal? You can see that I don't have these chevrons, and this cursor is flashing, waiting for me to put in a response. So apparently it wants to know my favorite animal, so I will put a dog, and then I hit enter, and oh, the program ended. So that's all I asked it to do. So right now I just wanted you to see that the input is sitting there getting information from the user. Well, what can I do with that information? I want to put that information into a variable that I've called favAnimal, right? So what happens then is by using this input, the agreement by using this function is that the computer will go out, get a value from the user, return that back to me, and counts on me to do something with it. It doesn't just magically, it's not magically available. Anytime I have a value, I want to put it into, you remember our pseudocode? Let's just remember our pseudocode. I'm going to comment this out. And remember in our pseudocode, we'd put something like input and a variable name. So when we use this input here, whatever input comes back to us, in this case the form of dog, and we need to give it a variable name to put it in. So I guess I can just put this code up here for reference so we can remember what happens there. I put the space in here. This space doesn't matter because it's just making it more readable for you. Isn't that easier for you to separate your thoughts when you look at each of these lines? Oh, right, that one just prints the animal, this one. So this spaces is just for the user. It's to make it easier for you to read. The Python doesn't care about any of the white spaces or the blank lines in between. Incidentally, notice, I neglected to say this at first, but notice that all of these are on the same indentation line. They're all at the edge of this page. It will not work if I indent this P at all. If I try to run this now, notice how this P is indented a little further than this P for print. Python doesn't like that, and it doesn't put up with it, and it's what we call syntactically incorrect. It doesn't follow the right rules, and therefore we get an error. It says, oh, I'm not even going to try and run this code. You have done something wrong. It's an unexpected indent. And so I get this error message. It tries to highlight where it thinks the problem is, and now I'm going to backspace. So that's called a compile error. A compile error means syntactically it's not even, there's something, you've forgotten a question mark, you've forgotten a period, you've forgotten to indent your first line of your paragraph. Remember your rules from English? Same kind of things apply here. You have to follow the rules or you don't get to run your code. It's called a compile error. Doesn't even take us to this output screen. All right, so the point here was, let's get back to the point. The point was that I have to put in a variable name. So I'm going to use this name that I declared above. I'm going to use favAnimal equals. Okay, so what I've done is I'm saying whatever comes back from input is going to be a string because dog is a string. And I want, when that's returned, when input gives me that value from the keyboard, please put that into this variable name so that way I can access it later on in the code. So now I have favAnimal. Nothing different is going to happen to the screen here. Everything's going to run the same. No compile errors. It worked. What is your favorite animal? My favorite animal is a dog. It still returned the same chevron, but what would have happened internally is I also have access to the dog if I want to print it out later. In other words, let's do this. I'm going to print. I'm going to make a print statement. Let me just type it in because I can't talk and type at the same time. Oh yes, I love space. Plus favAnimal plus s2. Okay, so, oh, there's my pretty gray bar. So let's see what I've done here. So now I've created a sentence that I want printed, and that sentence is, remember this, concatenating strings. So it's joining strings. It's joining this literal string in which I told it exactly what to say. It's joining whatever value is in this variable. The value in this variable is what was returned in the line above. So it's very important that you do these in order. I can't try to get a value if I haven't gotten it from the user yet. So this order is very important. And then I'm going to concatenate it to S, because I'm making that animal plural, too. Remember, everything that's in this string is literally what's going to be printed. And this variable is going to be replaced with whatever values in that variable. So if we run this again, run, what is your favorite animal? Well, it's a dog. I guess you already knew that. Oops, why are you barking at me? Sorry. Oh yes, I love dogs too. So you can see the output did exactly what I asked it to do. Print literally what was in this string, join or concatenate what's ever in this variable, which was a string of dog, and then finish it off with the rest of the sentence. So that's looking good so far. All right, so what can we do next? Oh yes, we were going to guess the user's age. So I'm going to comment and say guess the user's age. Okay, so first of all I'm going to print out, again with print, I am going to guess your age. Now remember this stuff here, and we'll understand this more, is just trying to give us an idea of syntactically what it's expecting, what kinds of things. There's a print word, I expect parentheses to make the syntax correct, and I expect some of these things inside the parentheses. Well, I don't know what all those things are at the moment, but I do know that I have to put in a value, and the value here is a string. So I'm going to put, I am going to guess your age, quote, and there's my bar. Perfect. So the computer's going to print this out. I'm going to guess your age. I'm very excited to see this. Okay, so I think the next thing I'm going to do is print a prompt for some input. So I'm going to print a string that says, what is your year of birth? Question mark. So that's what it's going to prompt the user with. Remember my closing quotes, my closing parentheses, opening and closing, very important. Okay. So now I need to get the year of birth from the user. All right, so remember, in order to get something from the user, we use that input method, okay? Open and closing parentheses. So we've just said we're going to get a value from the user, and we need to put that returned value into a variable. Remember that? So I'm going to gather that year that they put in a year of birth, and I'm going to put that into this variable that I've set up for myself. So year of birth equals, remember that variables have to be case sensitive. They have to match exactly. If I make this all lowercase, for example, that will be, those don't match at all. So we have to make sure that our variables match, and they match in case. Okay, so let's see what happens when I run this. Are you expecting an error? Yeah, I kind of am. What is my favorite animal? Well, it's dogs. What is your year of birth? I'm going to lie. 2001. Yeah, okay. Oh, it worked. Okay, so that looks good so far. Here's where the error comes in. Okay, so didn't have an error. I'm aware of that. All right, so what we're going to do is this. We need to calculate age. And age in this case is equal to, so now I'm doing an assignment statement and I need my calculation. Let's say it's 2017 minus age, okay? 2000 should produce our age. And so then let's print out the age to make sure it's correct. Are you with me? All right, so you know what I'm going to, well, that's okay. All right, so year of birth is going to get a value. I'm going to put in 2001. I'm going to create a calculation, come up with an age, and then print that out. Let's see what happens now. All right, what's my favorite animal? Well, it's still dogs. What is your year of birth? 2001. Wait a minute. That didn't work. Why is that? It still says 2017. Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, let's do this. It didn't seem to make this calculation. It sort of ignored that. So let's put this in parentheses and say, could you please make this calculation? Okay, I've got that bar. Let's see what happens there. Okay, what is my favorite animal? Dogs. What is your year of birth? 2017. What's going on here? Oh, I've got the wrong value in there. Did you catch that? And you didn't tell me? That was rude. Okay, so we really wanted year of birth here. Okay. All right, so year of birth. So I was supposed to take the year of birth and subtract that from 2017. All right, now let's see what happens. Now I expected to have an error. I make mistakes too. Don't tell my husband. Okay, what is the year of birth? 2001. Oh, hey, now I did get an error. What is going on here? Let's see if I can understand what the error is saying. It says in this file, okay, sample.py, on line 31, this formula made me uncomfortable. I don't understand what unsupported operand type for minus, int, and string. int and string. So something about an int and something about a string. Very interesting. So sometimes these error messages, until you start getting comfortable with what they say, look super cryptic and scary. But the more you try to read it and decipher it, the quicker you'll be able to figure out what your problems are. This one is not one I'd expect you to know yet, which is why I've used it as an example. All right, so here's what happened. When we used input, as I've asked you to do to get user input, what gets returned is no matter what's typed in at the keyboard, what's returned is a data type string. So when input got returned and I put in 2001, you look at that as, oh, that's no problem, that's an integer. But that's not how the program looked at it. It looked at it as a string. So as far as it was concerned, year of birth was a string. And so when I tried to take a integer and subtract a string, it got upset. It said, I don't know how to subtract a string from an integer minus a string. I don't understand that. So I think I'll just give you a nasty red error message instead. So how do we fix that? Well, we have to do what's called, we're going to convert. It's also called casting, which I'm not sure is in the book, but we're going to convert what got pulled in as a string, we're going to convert it into an int. In other words, here's how to do it. I'm going to put in the word int in front of input, and I'm going to surround that by parentheses. So again, I'm using a function that's called, I'm going to make this go away for a moment, Control X. So recognize here that I have a function called int, which means that anything that's inside of this parenthesis is going to get converted as the best it can into an integer. Like if I had dog in there, well, dog's not going to get converted to int, so that's probably going to give me this nasty red throw up again. But if I put something inside of it that can be converted to an int, in other words, if I put 2001, this is now, whatever's inside the parenthesis will get rendered first or evaluated first. So first, input will run. It'll receive a value from the keyboard. Whatever that value is gets returned. If this gets converted into an int, and that conversion then goes into year of birth. So now when I run this, 2017 is an integer. Year of birth will become an integer because we converted it, and I should now be able to make this calculation because I can subtract integers. I can't subtract a string from an integer. So let's run that and see if it works. Well, my favorite animal is still a dog. Oh, click again, there we go. Dog. What is your year of birth? 2001. So now it gets input, so the inside the parentheses gets done first. The keyboard's waiting for me to return a value. As soon as I hit enter, that value is going to get converted into an int. And that int then will get put into year of birth. And in fact, the calculation worked. 2017 minus 2001. Whoa, I'm young. Kind of a young teacher, huh? Oh, I'm super smart. Just kidding. All right, so I hope you see what's happening there. I think I'll do one other thing. No, that's probably a good place to stop. And we'll look at more examples in subsequent videos. But for now, we've got a lot accomplished in this video. We have decided that we've got an interactive shell that will run our code line. Just one line is all we can do. If we want to create lots of statements or a big code that we want to be able to run all at once, we can save it in a file. So we've done File and Open to create a new file. We saved it with the .py extension. We learned that we can create comments on multiple lines using the 3 apostrophes. That's the little key, the key that has the quotes on top and then the apostrophe on the bottom on your keyboard. We can write just a one-liner of comments if we want using our hashtag. So only this line will be commented out or commented, and comments are for our readers, not for the program. We created some variables and we decided what type of variable, what type of data type it was by assigning it a value right away. So we assigned name, a string, a literal string, so name got filled with the word Kirsten. We decided that fave animal was going to be received from our user, so we gave it an empty string, which says you're going to be a string, but I don't know what goes inside yet, so I'm just going to give you a little blank space, so to speak. We created age and we gave it 0 because we decided that that was going to be an integer. Year of birth was also going to be an integer. We learned that we can use this print function and we can give it things inside of the parentheses, whether it be whether we use strings, a literal string, and then we could do more things if we wanted to by putting a comma and a variable name if we wanted to. We could put more strings, but the comma simply said I'm going to print lots of things, and the more things I want to print, I can just keep separating with a comma and then put those all on a single line. We printed, this is just a literal string. We use the word input or the function input with parentheses, which returns a string. And so we need to make sure that we are putting it into a variable that's returned from the keyboard that is the proper data type. In this case, fave animal is a string, so the input would return a string, and we're all happy there. So then we did, instead of the comma, which we did up here, this time we joined with plus signs. The output of these two are exactly the same. If I had put commas here instead of plus signs, it would have done the same thing, but I just want you to get used to this idea of concatenating strings, which means joining them with these plus signs. And then we did some calculation here. Again, we had the fact that we had the input, but we also needed to surround the input with an int and parenthesis, so that way after input would run, it would be converted to an int and put in year of birth. And the reason why that was important was because year of birth needs to be a integer so that we could make a math calculation using it. I can't calculate year of birth if it's a string, which is what input by itself returns. So we converted it to an int. We put that into this variable age, and at the end we printed out age. So that's our get our feet wet. Let's jump into Python, and let's do more examples in the next video.